time is not real, and no, I don't mean time itself, but the way we as humans break down our lives into years and these portioned milestones for how long it's supposed to take you before you can start learning as a child, and when you're supposed to become an adult. Well, in the US it's age 18, and when you're supposed to retire, in the US it's 65, right? All of these numbers are arbitrary, and we know that because we can't even agree on them, right? Different countries have different definitions of when these numbers are supposed to occur. Even different states have different definitions. And this just goes to show that, yeah, even if you can ballpark a range at which, somebody would start to be able to learn to read and write, or somebody is functional enough to be in the world by themselves, right? Even though you can ballpark these numbers, there's enough outliers everywhere that it just goes to show these are not real numbers. They are society's construction of when these events in our life should occur. And it's worth remembering that and being able to say, yeah, this doesn't matter if I don't necessarily reach this goal in the, correct amount of time, in the amount of time that everybody else reached it in. If it takes you longer than you were supposed to, in quotes, to reach a certain goal, that's okay. What matters more than the amount of time it takes is that you're actually going in the correct direction, because the modern era, we have this obsession with speed. We have this obsession with doing everything as quickly as possible, right? We want to be getting results back as fast as possible. We want to be, reaching achievements as fast as possible. We want to be making money as fast as possible. We want to be having the fastest internet so we can doom scroll as fast as possible, right? We have this absolute obsession with speed. And I mean, we could argue all day about how this came about, whether it's the rise of technology in, the last couple hundred years or whatever. However it came about, we clearly have this obsession with speed, and we all need to take a minute and slow down and actually focus on where we are going, the direction in which we're going, because progress is not progress at all if you are not going in the right direction, okay? If you have certain goals, a bird just flew by really quickly. Anyways, if you have certain goals, if you are working towards those goals, the speed at which you work doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it takes you twice as long as it takes everybody else. And I wanted to specifically make this video almost as a follow-up to last week's video talking about New Year's resolutions and stuff, because I want to make it clear that, even though I do think it's a good idea to work on yourself as a person, there's no shame in having goals take longer than you originally thought they would take, If I had something I wanted to accomplish by the time 2026 rolls around and I'm only halfway done with it by then, that's okay. I'll finish it by 2027, right? And I think we all need to remember that progress is the direction in which you're going. It's not the speed at which you're going, right? If somebody is running 15 miles an hour in the wrong direction, they are never going to get to the finish line, whereas somebody crawling along at 2 miles an hour will eventually get to that finish line. And, there's a lot of examples of this in life, right? If you, for example, take an extra year to finish school, right? If you're doing like a 4-year degree program, sorry if the wind is really loud. If you're doing like a 4-year degree program and it takes you 5 years to finish it, 10 years later down the line, that's not really going to matter. It doesn't matter that it took you an extra year, even if it feels like in the moment that you're a failure because everybody else is, graduating with their degree in hand and you're not because it's taking you an extra year. And I'm saying this because I literally know somebody who is taking longer to complete a degree, and they are a very smart person. They had things happen in their life that contributed to them, taking longer with this degree. And it is fine. It is fine. Even though other people they know are going to be graduating at a certain time and they're not, that's fine. They're still going to accomplish that end goal, even if it takes them another couple extra years. And it's worth remembering that, and it's worth also being patient with yourself and extending yourself the same courtesy that you extend to other people. And I just went on that whole tangent of I can extend the courtesy to this friend of knowing that they're still a really smart person, even if it's taking them longer than it might have taken somebody else to complete this degree. I know they're working on it, and I am so patient with them. I don't think there's any pressure for them to finish this degree any faster. They're working on it, right? But I also need to extend that same courtesy to myself in whatever areas it applies for me. And I think a lot of people struggle with this idea of sort of giving ourselves the same grace that we give to others. It's kind of hard to do that, because if you have high standards for yourself, you can very easily fall into this trap of, well, this applies to me, but I can let everybody else slide. I can have patience for everybody else, but I really need to be doing this the best. I need to be getting there the fastest. And that's simply not true. Okay? As long as you are going in the right direction, as long as you are making some incremental progress every day, it doesn't matter how long it takes you. And I want to also address the concept of wasting time, because I've talked about this before in terms of wasting time on the internet and wasting time playing video games. And I think there is, a clear definition of wasting time, right? Wasting time is doing something that you don't want to be doing, and you're just throwing away time into it when you really wish you were doing something else, but you can't tear yourself away from it, right? So if you're, sitting there passed out at a bar and you really wish you were doing something else, but you didn't know what else to do, so you just went to the bar, that's wasting time, right? Whereas sitting here and watching the sunset is not wasting time. And in fact, I literally spent another, I don't even know how long, this morning just watching the sun rays filtering in through the window. I've got a bunch of plants at the window and they're all looking very green and healthy, which is very nice compared to how it is out here in this season. And I'll just sit there and watch them, and I'll watch the sun come up and the sun filter through the window. And that is one of the most beautiful things that I could ever see. And I will just sit there and watch, the steam rising off my cup of coffee or my cup of tea, right? And taking the time for that is not wasting time. That is not wasting time, okay? That is the moments that I'm going to remember. When 10 or 20 or 30 years go by, those are the moments that stick in my mind. And those moments compared to moments of, working and trying to achieve something the fastest, right? All of the hours and hours that I spend working on something or trying to make money, that is not what I'm going to be remembering. That is not what I'm going to be valuing. And that actually brings me to another point that I wanted to address in this video, which is the idea of money buying happiness or lack thereof, since that's sort of a question that has been around for eternity, right? Does money really buy happiness? And my answer to it is nuanced, I would say. I think you do need a certain amount of money to be happy, right? Most people are not going to be able to be happy if they're broke, right? If you can't afford rent, you are probably not going to be very happy, for most people at least. And yes, sometimes you'll have a very rare occurrence of somebody who manages to be, completely broke and own nothing and still be the happiest person alive. But that is rare. Most of us don't have the willpower to do that. So yes, we do need some amount of money, but you definitely get to a point of diminishing returns where the value of like a fancy car, for example, or a better PC, right? That is not going to bring value compared to just, sitting there and watching the sunset or being around family or doing all of these tiny moments in life that are really what makes our lives so special and what makes the world such a special place to be in. And I know this sounds kind of sappy and cliche, but I really did want to talk about this, following up to my video last week, because I really don't like the idea of this, hustle culture that has come about in recent years. And I definitely fell into that culture for a significant portion of my life, of this idea of I have to be working super hard and I can't have a single minute that I'm not doing something productive. And that is simply not the case. That is not true. The best moments of your life will be the unproductive moments. Anyways, go watch the sunset. I'll see you next time. Peace.